All right, thanks for being here this morning, JP. Let's start out. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your firm?
Sure. Well, thanks for having me, Molly, and thanks for having me as part of this project, and Tishman Speyer as well. We're very excited to participate in this project, which has been a long time coming. The origins of this project were many years ago now, and so super excited that we've gotten to the point where we will have an opportunity to see results in the near future, and really excited about how the project turned out in terms of the various different companies and volunteers you got on the project. So I think it's going to be a really comprehensive look at this topic. In terms of a little bit me and Tishman Speyer, so Jonathan Flaherty, I'm Tishman Speyer's Director of Sustainability and Building Technologies. I've been at the company for 15 years and have spent probably the last 12 doing various things in sustainability and building technologies. This project fits square into the nexus of both sustainability and what we put into buildings and building technology in general. So it's a logical project for me to work on, and I've been excited to work on it. Tishman Speyer Properties is a global private equity real estate firm. We have about 150 properties globally and I'm going to get this wrong, so I'll have to come back and edit it, but I think it's like $58 billion under management. And so we are both an operator and a developer. We build buildings around the world, and we buy and sell and acquire buildings as well. And we do lots of business with JB&B.
Fantastic. Thank you. All right, so can you tell us a little bit about why you and Tishman Speyer decided to participate in the Benchmark 8760 initiative?
Sure. Well, we're very interested in performance data writ large, and there's a whole bunch of ways that we would like to look at how buildings perform. You guys have helped us look at how buildings perform. And there's a whole bunch of ways that various local, state, and federal governments would like us to look at how buildings perform in the context of carbon and energy and global warming. And so we're really hoping this project expands the toolkit of options in looking at how buildings perform. Today, most building performance data is collected based on total energy divided by square foot and energy use intensity. And obviously that makes a lot of sense. There's clear value in looking at all the energy consumed in the building and looking at the size, but there are lots of other ways that we could potentially be looking at how buildings perform beyond just energy per square foot. And there are probably lots of better ways to do it, especially in certain types of buildings. And so what we were really excited about in working on this project with you guys is to explore some of those other ways we could look at building performance and some of the other ways that we think you can tease out how well a building's performing by looking beyond EUI. And I think there's, as we'll talk about a little later, lots of other entities that are very interested in this type of data and modeling as well. And what we hope is that you guys will, along with all the partners, be able to figure out how to make the case that there are lots of other ways to measure building performance beyond just energy use intensity. And the number of people in the building, I think, will turn out to be one of the most impactful ways to do that.
Absolutely. Yeah, so this is great. This is perfect and a good lead into the next question here. So Benchmark 8760 and what you're talking about here in terms of building performance, it's all about hourly building data, right? A really granular sense of what's happening across not just square footage to your point, but occupancy, grid intensity, and weather. You know, in your view, what is the value of that hourly data versus something like a monthly data or an average input that we might see in existing benchmarking and performance standards?
Sure. So, yeah, I mean, we very much divide the world of building data into real-time data and sort of auditable data. And auditable data is more like things that come in based on the invoice every 30 days, monthly, quarterly, annually. And ultimately, how we report on a carbon accounting basis in terms of whether it be our annual sustainability report or any sort of official sources of data today are all based on invoices, which is by definition every 30 days, but it obviously could be as much as 60 days in arrears. There's lots of good reasons why that's how carbon accounting works, and we want to have that source set of data to go back to. We also have a whole separate world of real-time energy data that we use to run the buildings better. And it seems odd that you would have two sets of data the same and not necessarily use them for the same purposes, but the answer is that real-time data, as you are working on collecting and as we do look at today, is really used to help the building operator make immediate changes in how the building is run and is not really has much of anything to do today with carbon accounting. So the carbon accounting world's over here, real-time energy data is over here. The other thing about real-time energy data is, by definition, it is often not something that you can go back and audit or see because there's no invoices. It's just plugging into meters and getting that data in real time. For the vast majority of scenarios of actually running the building, that's just fine, right? What we want to tell the operator is, today, Thursday, this is the weather, this is the grid conditions, this is the number of people in the building, these are the changes you can make to run the building. And that can obviously include optimizing lighting, HVAC, any number of things. As we look to the future, this will become even more relevant. Obviously, today, the main value in this sort of granular data is that we pay time of use rates for electricity in buildings and for steam and gas as well to some extent. And so being able to understand when you're using that energy and shift it to other periods of time obviously has significant financial benefits. But today, that's all about energy, right? And even then, the value of doing that is certainly high enough that we've put real-time energy management systems into all of our buildings, but not something that is a truly granular look at building operations all the time. We try to use it that way, but for most of the purposes that the grid operator and Con Ed and others want you to use it for is to make, again, real-time changes in some hot summer afternoon in how you're running the building. And that's all about energy, the grid, and all important things, but we really only take one input in, Con Ed saying there's a problem, and then us looking at the hours available and trying to shift that load. There'd be lots of ways to do that in a more granular basis throughout the day. And so certainly you could use it for energy efficiency and running HVAC and lighting less on floors that are unoccupied. But where it really goes in the future is real-time carbon data. And ultimately, if we look down the road, programs like demand response today are not going to be the right programs in 10 years when New York's grid is dominated by, hopefully, large numbers of windmills in the Atlantic Ocean and big transmission lines to Canada and upstate. In a world that looks like that, granular carbon data and data how buildings operate on a very granular basis will be far more important and much more likely will be something that you are rewarded for changing your behavior in real time against. And that's really ties into some of the questions you're going to ask later about the big beneficiaries. But what we hope here is that this data lays out pathways for various local governments, regulators, and grid operators to think about how to take this data and make everything a much more responsive system.
Yeah, you beat me to my next question, right? Which is what will hopefully come out of this project. And what we've built is a proof of concept platform, sort of mimics a benchmarking platform, but takes in these hourly data inputs from buildings. It sounds like what you're hoping to get out of that potentially, and please feel free to kind of add in or correct me if I'm wrong here, is a more comprehensive way of evaluating building performance, given all that's happening and everything that you just mentioned around the grid, not just from an energy perspective, but from a carbon perspective as well, right? So it's not just about enabling building owners to dynamically change things, that's absolutely critical, but it's also about accounting for those changes appropriately.
Yep.
And so,
And hopefully getting paid for them.
And hopefully getting paid for them. So through your kind of work and your interaction with this Benchmark 8760 initiative and platform, what are you hoping will be sort of the outcome of this work here?
Well, we know that various regulators, local governments, federal governments, whether it be the EPA, the City of New York, and others, all see not just the value in this, but the necessity in this down the road. Energy Star has been quite clear that if there was some magic way they could measure population at every building, they would do it tomorrow if they could. That's just not something that they currently have the ability to extract from the buildings that they measure. And frankly, most buildings in the United States don't measure it, so there isn't that data to be extracted. But clearly, organizations like EPA, Energy Star, and the City of New York see the value of going down that road. They don't currently have the tools to do so. For a lot of reasons. Obviously, it requires allocating government money to do that, and to make the case that that's a good idea is probably pretty clear, but how to do it is a lot less clear. And this is a world where you really have to get into all different kinds of buildings and understand how do they really work? How do buildings count people? Can they take advantage of this data? What kind of mechanical systems do they have that would allow you to take advantage of that once you have it? And what are all the different ways you can count people and all the different sort of granular data streams that we can bring in to do this? Once that's more laid out in sort of a piece of paper that many of these government or other regulators could see and say, that's a great case to make for spending $20 million of taxpayer dollars to go build a better, database for Energy Star that could truly collect that data, as just one example. But what we hope is that this set of programs and outcomes will drive towards better regulatory action in the future, better, and not just regulatory action, but understanding the existing programs can be modified to better show how a building is truly performing. And again, hopefully all of this will drive to better programs in the future, both regulatory and non-regulatory. But somebody's got to make the case. Somebody's got to herd all of the private sector entities to do all the sort of typology of buildings and systems, collect all that data, and more broadly make the case. So that's, I think, what we're going to get out of this, and that's what I'm excited for. And I think that anybody in commercial real estate would be excited for these outcomes.
That's great to hear. And yeah, that's exactly what we're hoping for with the initiative and the proof of concept platform, is to be able to overcome those barriers that you mentioned. How do you do it? Is it feasible? Is it affordable, right? The initiative is all about building a proof of concept to show those regulatory agencies how, if, and how it could be done. So I'm glad to hear that the outcomes so far have been good and satisfactory, and we thank you for participating in the initiative. Hopefully it's going to be impactful.
I think it will. I think it will. And we're, again, at the end of the day, we would really like to make sure that the building sector is right there with everybody else and trying to figure out the next wave of energy grids and optimization and carbon optimization. And arguably, in the past, the commercial real estate industry has been somewhat of a follower of the regulatory action as opposed to a leader. And hopefully this is an example of where a whole bunch of private sector entities coming together, working with you guys, and I sort of can make the case that there are better outcomes here than the ones that are currently being done. And so I'm excited, again, that this will be an opportunity to show that the private sector can come together and try to help guide the regulatory pathway here such that we are at the table and having that conversation up front and not being reactionary to various ways that the government would like to respond to these in the future. I mean, it's written into Local Law 97 that we need hourly carbon data. How's that happening? It's not happening right now, right? And so, and we know that there are lots of examples where EPA and others would like to add these sorts of enhancements. They don't have the ability to do that today. So again, I'm really excited that hopefully we'll be able to show a pathway to much better outcomes and be much more proactive in having that conversation.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me, Molly.
Anytime.